Seeds of connection. The morning sun glinted off the sea as Prisha Malhotra wiped down the outdoor tables at Saltwater Cafe. She tucked a wayward strand of hair behind her ear, leaving a smudge of charcoal on her temple, evidence of the sketching she'd done before her shift. The small cafe perched on the edge of Sagarpur's tourist district, where the paved roads gave way to the fishing village's packed dirt paths. "Another coffee, please," called a voice from table 7, American accent. Probably another digital nomad hoping to find authenticity in their carefully curated Instagram shots of local life. Prisha forced a smile and nodded, though her thoughts drifted to the half-finished canvas waiting in her tiny apartment above her parents. Grocery store.art school rejection letters had piled up last month, each one citing her technical promise, but lack of distinctive voice. Meanwhile, her parents' not-so-subtle hints about the bank manager's son grew more frequent. At 23, time was supposedly running out, at least according to her mother. The rhythm of the morning was broken by a familiar figure approaching from the beach. Rehan Patel arrived precisely at 10:17 each day, his weathered boat docked after the morning catch. Unlike the other fishermen who sold their hauls directly to restaurants through intermediaries, Rehan walked the extra kilometer to deliver personally to each establishment. His father had done the same before him, building relationships that survived even when larger commercial operations threatened the village's traditional fishing practices. "Morning, Prisaji," he said, setting down a wooden crate of gleaming fish. His smile revealed a slightly crooked front tooth, the result of a childhood accident on his father's boat. "The red snapper is exceptional today." Prisha peered into the crate. "Chef Samir will be pleased. He's been complaining about quality all week. Only the best for saltwater," Rehan replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Though only his hands bore the calluses and small scars of someone who had worked on fishing boats since childhood. "I noticed your painting on the specials board. The lighthouse at sunset, it captures something ... True." Heat rose to Prisha's cheeks. Most people complimented her technical skill, but Rehan always saw something deeper. "Just a quick sketch. Nothing special." "I disagree." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, smooth piece of sea glass in a deep blue hue. "Found this yesterday. Reminded me of the color you use for the deepest water in your paintings." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the small gift, sending an unexpected current up her arm. This had become their ritual over the past months, small exchanges that existed outside the rigid social boundaries of Sagapur. He brought sea treasures. She slipped him sketches of boats against horizons or fishermen at dawn. "Prisha, order." For table 4, her manager's voice shattered the moment. "Coming." She tucked the sea glass into her apron pocket. "Thank you, Rehan." As she turned, he caught her wrist gently. "There's a lantern festival in the next village on Friday. Small, nothing fancy, but the light on the water." He trailed off uncharacteristically. Hesitant Friday was her cousin's engagement ceremony, an unavoidable family obligation. "I can't" family thing. Disappointment flickered across his face before he nodded in understanding. "Another time, perhaps." She watched him leave, noticing how he stopped to help an elderly tourist navigate the uneven steps down to the beach. That was Rehan always extending kindness outward, regardless of who was watching later that evening. As sunset painted the sky in shades she could never quite capture, Prisha found herself sketching his profile from memory. Her phone buzzed with a reminder about meeting the bank manager's son for coffee. Tomorrow, a casual introduction her mother had orchestrated. On her bedside table, the blue sea glass caught the last light of day. Beside it lay a small stack of brochures for business schools in Mumbai, her father's suggested alternative to her impractical artistic dreams. The path ahead seemed predetermined, laid out by expectations and practicalities. Yet, as she added shading too, Rehan's hands and her sketch hands that worked with both strength and surprising gentleness, Prisha wondered about paths not marked on any map her family recognized. In the margin of her sketchbook, she absent-mindedly wrote the date of the Lantern Festival, then quickly crossed it out. Some boundaries existed for reasons beyond her control. Some waters were simply not meant to be crossed. Tides of hesitation, the summer progressed, with a relentless heat that seemed to slow time itself. Prisha found herself watching the cafe clock, anticipating the 10:17 arrival that had become the highlight of her monotonous days. Despite her rejection of the Lantern Festival invitation, Rihan's deliveries continued. Though something had shifted, a new awareness hummed between them, electric and uncertain. "You're distracted again?" observed Namrata, her coworker, as Prisha nearly overfilled a customer's coffee cup. "Is it the fisherman? He looked at you for ages yesterday." "We're just friendly," Prisha replied, though her heart quickened. "He's a good customer," Namrata raised an eyebrow. "Friendly enough that you've drawn him 7 times in your sketchbook." When Prisha looked alarmed, she added, "You left it open yesterday during break." The truth was that Prisha had found herself increasingly drawn to Rihan's quiet determination. Unlike the bank manager's son, who had spent their entire casual coffee date talking about his father's connections, Rihan spoke of dreams with reverence rather than entitlement. He wanted to revolutionize the local fishing industry with sustainable practices. To build something that honored tradition while embracing change. On a particularly sweltering Thursday, Prisha escaped during her break to the small cove beyond. The tourist beach, she'd discovered it years ago, perfect crescent of sand sheltered by rocky outcroppings, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. She kicked off her sandals and waded into the cool water, still wearing her cafe uniform shorts and t-shirt. "Secret escape?" familiar voice called. Prisha spun around to find Rehan perched on one of the rocks, mending a fishing net with practiced movements. Embarrassment flooded her face. "I didn't realize anyone was here. My father taught me about this spot," he explained. Said it was where the most honest fish lived, ones that didn't follow the easy currents. His smile was warm. "I come here to think." Impulsively, she sat beside him on the sun-warmed rock. "What are you thinking about today?" "Changes." His fingers never stopped their methodical weaving of the net. "I've been offered a position on a commercial vessel. Deep-sea fishing, based out of Chennai." Something plummeted in Prisha's stomach. "That sounds ... impressive. It would mean leaving Sagarpa. For a long time, maybe permanently." His dark eyes met hers. "Unless I had a reason to return." The implication hung between them, suspended like a drop of water about to fall. Prisha stared at the horizon, where blue met blue in an indistinct line. "When would you leave?" 2 weeks. His hands stilled on the net. "Prisha, I need to say something." She knew what was coming, had perhaps known it was inevitable from the moment he'd first noticed her paintings. Part of her wanted to stop him, to preserve the delicate balance they'd maintained. Another part, a wilder part she rarely acknowledged, wanted to hear the words forming on his lips. "I've never met anyone like you," he continued, voice steady, despite the vulnerability in his expression. "You see beauty where others don't bother to look. You dream despite everyone telling you to be practical." Took a deep breath. "I think I've fallen in love with you." The confession hung in the salt-tinged air. Prisha's chest tightened as conflicting emotions warred within her. How simple it would be to lean forward, to choose this path that felt simultaneously terrifying and right. Instead, practicality reasserted itself, her parents' expectations, the community's judgment, the reality of their different worlds. "Rihan," she began, her voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of waves. "You're kind and wonderful, and I care about you, but ... double quotes." She forced herself to continue. "My family has certain expectations. They've sacrificed everything for me to have opportunities they never had." "I understand sacrifice," he said quietly. "My father died, ensuring I could continue my education." "It's different," she insisted, though the words felt hollow. "You're a fisherman. I'm expected to marry someone ... established." Pain flashed across his features before his expression composed itself. "Someone like the man your mother arranged for you to meet." News traveled quickly in Sagarpur. Yes, she couldn't meet his eyes. Someone like that. Rahan nodded slowly, retying a knot in his net with more force than necessary. "I see." "It's not that I don't," she began, but he gently interrupted. "You don't need to explain, Praseji. We are who we are." He stood, gathering his mending tools. "I hope he makes you happy." That evening, Prisha sat with her parents as they enthusiastically discussed the bank manager's son's virtues. She nodded at appropriate intervals, her mind replaying the hurt in Rihan's eyes. Later, alone in her room, she removed the collection of sea glass from her drawer 7 pieces. Each delivered with a story, each connecting her to something authentic and unrefined. 2 weeks passed in a blur. Rehan's morning deliveries were now handled by his cousin, a taciturn young man who never commented on her artwork. Prisha found herself drawing less, the inspiration that had flowed so readily, now reduced to a trickle on what would have been Rehan's last day in Sagarpur. Prisha impulsively walked to the fishing docks at dawn. Several boats were preparing to depart, but his was nowhere to be seen. "Looking for Rehan Patel?" asked an elderly fisherman, noting her searching gaze. "Left yesterday. Couldn't wait to start his new life, I suppose." Prisha thanked him and turned away, surprised by the physical ache in her chest. That evening she painted the cove where he had confessed his feelings, adding a solitary figure on the rocks, a man looking out to sea, toward horizons she had been too afraid to imagine. She titled it "Departure" and hung it in her bedroom, where no visitors would see it or ask about the lone fisherman with his face turned away, surrounded by possibilities as vast as the ocean itself. Shifting horizons, 7 years, could reshape landscapes, both physical and personal. Sagarpur had evolved from a sleepy fishing village with a modest tourist appeal into a destination featured in travel magazines. Luxury resorts now dotted the coastline where traditional fishing boats once dominated, their modern architecture gleaming against the ancient sea. Prisha stood at the window of her small art gallery, watching tourists meander along the newly paved promenade. At 30, she had achieved a measure of success that would have seemed impossible in her cafe days. Coastal Visions had opened 3 years ago, showcasing her paintings alongside other local artists. It wasn't the international recognition she'd once dreamed of, but it was respectable enough that her parents had eventually accepted her choice to pursue art professionally. "The Australian couple loved the Lighthouse series," said Vikram, her assistant, interrupting her thoughts. "Oh, they're taking 2 pieces." "That's wonderful," Prisha replied, though her enthusiasm felt practiced. Sales brought validation, but rarely. The satisfaction she craved, the truth one she acknowledged only in her most honest moments, was that success had arrived with a hollow center. Her engagement to Arjun Kapoor, the bank manager's son, had dissolved 4 years ago when he accepted a position in Singapore, and she refused to abandon her fledgling artistic career. Her parents had been devastated, then resigned, then finally supportive when her first exhibition received positive reviews in a national arts magazine. Yet something vital seemed missing from her work. Critics noted her technical excellence, but mentioned a certain emotional distance, echoing those early rejection letters from art schools. Prisha recognized the truth in their assessment. She painted what she observed, but struggled to paint what she felt. "Also, this came for you," Vikram added, handing her an embossed envelope. The invitation inside was printed on recycled paper embedded with wildflower seeds plant after reading, according to the instructions. "Coastal Conservation Initiative. Annual Gala," she read aloud, "honoring innovative approaches to sustainable fishing and marine preservation." The event was scheduled for next weekend at the newly opened Oceanfront Hotel. It's trying to get the wealthy tourists to care about something beyond their infinity pools, Vikram commented. "Good luck with that." Prisha was about to set the invitation aside when a name in the program listing caught her eye. Keynote address by Rehan Patel, founder of Aquabalance Fisheries. The sea glass collection she kept in her desk drawer suddenly seemed to pulse with significance. Rehan. The name conjured memories she had carefully stored away, dawn light on weathered hands. A crooked smile, dreams spoken with quiet certainty. That evening, Prisha searched his name online, something she had resisted doing for years. Articles appeared immediately, not just local news, but features in business magazines and sustainability journals. The photographs showed a man she both recognized and didn't, the same thoughtful eyes, but now framed by confidence that comes from proven success. Aquabalance Fisheries had revolutionized sustainable fishing practices across 3 states, employing traditional fishermen while implementing innovative conservation techniques. Rehan had developed a cooperative model that protected both marine ecosystems and fishing communities' livelihoods. One article quoted him, true sustainability honors both tradition and innovation. We must preserve what matters while embracing necessary change. Prisha closed her laptop, unsettled by the parallel paths their lives had taken. Both had achieved versions of their youthful dreams. Both had remained connected to their roots while pushing boundaries, yet they had done so in separate spheres, worlds apart. Despite the physical proximity, her phone chimed with a message from her mother. Dinner Sunday. Sharma Auntie's nephew is visiting from Mumbai. Very successful architect. Divorced, no children. Even after the broken engagement, her mother hadn't abandoned hope. Prisha declined politely, citing gallery commitments. Instead, she found herself walking to the cove which had somehow escaped development despite the transformation of surrounding beaches. The rocks remained unchanged, eternal sentinels against the advancing tide of progress, sitting where she had sat 7 years ago. Prisha removed her sketchbook from her bag. For the first time in months, inspiration flowed freely as she drew the meeting of land and sea, the negotiation between permanence and change. When finished, she studied her work with surprise. There was something new here, something that had been missing from her gallery pieces. Vulnerability, perhaps? Or truth? Across town, in the penthouse suite of the oceanfront hotel, Rehan Patel reviewed his presentation notes while gazing at the familiar coastline from an unfamiliar vantage point. On his desk sat a framed photograph of a woman with laugh lines around her eyes, standing beside him on the deck of a fishing boat. Divya, his business partner and wife of 3 years. Beside the photograph lay a worn newspaper clipping about the opening of Coastal Visions, featuring a small image of Prisha at her gallery debut. He had saved it without quite knowing why. Perhaps as a reminder of how life's rejections sometimes led to unexpected destinations. His phone rang. Divya calling from their Chennai headquarters. How does it feel to be back? Oh, she asked after. They discussed business matters. Rehan considered the question. Watching the sun set over the water in precisely the same way it had during his youth, like reading a familiar book with new understanding, he finally answered. The story hasn't changed, but I have. What he didn't say, what he scarcely admitted to himself, was that returning to Sagarpur stirred memories he'd thought long settled. Success had brought many things: purpose, impact, partnership. Occasionally, in quiet moments, we still remembered a young woman who saw beauty in broken things, who had once held a piece of blue sea glass to the light as if it contained all the ocean's mysteries. Reflections in the water. The oceanfront hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into an underwater dreamscape. Rippling blue lights created the illusion of being beneath the waves, while sustainable materials crafted to resemble coral and marine plants adorned every surface. Conservation-minded luxury, a contradiction, Prisha noted as she accepted a champagne flute from a passing server. She had debated attending until the last possible moment, changing outfits 3 times before. Settling on a midnight blue silk dress that reminded her of deep water, her gallery was well represented among Sagarpur's elite, making her presence at such events professionally necessary. At least that's what she told herself as she applied an extra touch of Kyle to her eyes. Prisha Malhotra, your recent exhibition was extraordinary, gushed Nandine Sharma, the hotel's art consultant. The way you captured the fishing community's struggle against commercialization, so powerful. Thank you, Prisha replied, though the compliment left her oddly uncomfortable. Her recent work documented the changing coastline, including the displacement of traditional fishing families like Rehan's. She wondered if that made her complicit or merely a witness. The evening progressed with predictable rhythms: networking, performative concern for environmental issues, charitable pledges from corporations whose practices often contradicted their philanthropy. Prisha moved through it all with practiced ease, her eyes occasionally scanning the room for one particular face. When the program began, she chose a seat near the back, heart accelerating as the moderator announced, "And now, our keynote speaker, a true innovator in sustainable fishing practices and marine conservation, Rehan Patel." Applause filled the room as he approached the podium. He wore a tailored navy suit that contrasted with her memories of him in weather-worn clothes, yet he moved with the same deliberate grace she remembered. Success had not changed that fundamental quality, the careful attention he brought to every action. "The ocean has always been our greatest teacher," he began, voice deeper than she recalled, but with the same thoughtful cadence. "It shows us that boundaries are fluid, that resilience comes through adaptation, and that everything's connected." For 40 minutes, he spoke without notes about the delicate balance between human needs and environmental protection. He described Aquabalance's work creating fishing cooperatives that employed traditional coal knowledge while incorporating scientific advances. Most compelling was his vision of coastal communities as stewards, rather than exploiters of philosophy, that had transformed livelihoods across 3 states. "Sustainability isn't about preservation alone," he concluded. "It's about evolution honoring the past while embracing necessary change." The fishermen of my childhood understood this instinctively. They read the water, respected its power, and took only what could be replenished. Today's challenges require us to rediscover that wisdom while developing new approaches. The future depends on our ability to balance tradition and innovation. Audience rose in standing ovation. Prisha stood with them, momentarily frozen, as their eyes met across the crowded room. Recognition flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps something more, before he nodded slightly and turned to accept congratulations from the event organizers. During the reception that followed, Prisha circulated among potential gallery clients, hyper-aware of Rihan's location at all times. He was consistently surrounded by admirers and industry representatives, making approach impossible without seeming deliberate. Just as she considered leaving, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Your gallery has transformed the old cafe space beautifully." She turned to find Rihan standing there, 2 glasses of sparkling water in hand. He offered one to her with a smile that still crinkled the corners of his eyes, though new lines marked the passage of time. "You've visited?" she asked, accepting the drink. "Last week, cognito." His expression was warm but measured. "Your work has evolved tremendously. The series on changing coastal landscapes, it captures something essential about progress and loss." Pride mingled with embarrassment at his assessment. "Thank you. Your speech was remarkable. What you've built with Aquabalance, it's exactly what you always talked about." "Not exactly," he admitted. "Dreams refine themselves through implementation. Reality has a way of reshaping vision." A woman approached, placing her hand lightly on Rihan's arm, mid-30s, with intelligent eyes and a confident bearing. "Sorry to interrupt, but Minister Desai is leaving and wants to discuss the Ratnagiri proposal." She extended her hand to Prisha. "I'm Divya Patel. Your artwork is stunning. Rihan showed me the piece he purchased from your gallery." "My wife and business partner," Rihan explained, his expression softening as he looked at Divya. "The real engineering mind behind Aquabalance's innovations." "A pleasure to meet you," Prisha managed, shaking Divya's hand. "Thank you for supporting the gallery, of course. Your perspective on coastal change aligns beautifully with our mission." Divya turned to Rihan. "Take your time. I'll keep the minister engaged." As Divya departed, silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with unspoken history. "She seems remarkable," Prisha offered genuinely. "She is. We met during a marine conservation conference in Chennai. She challenged everything about my initial business model." His smile held obvious affection. "Still does. Regularly," he found. "A true partner." "Yes." He studied her for a moment. "And you? I heard about your broken engagement some years ago. I'm sorry if that brought pain." The unexpected compassion in his voice caught her off guard. "It was for the best. He wanted a wife who would follow his career path. I needed to build my own." Rihan nodded with understanding. "You always had a clear vision, even when others couldn't see it." Something about his characterization struck Prisha as fundamentally incorrect. "Did I? I think I was terrified of disappointing everyone, of stepping beyond acceptable boundaries. Yet, you built a successful gallery showcasing work that challenges convention." His gaze was appraising. "That requires courage. Different from the courage it takes to leave everything familiar and build something new," she countered. The words carried unintended weight, referencing both his business and his departure years ago. Understanding passed between them, acknowledgement of the paths not taken. choices that had shaped their separate journeys. "I bought your painting of the cove," he said after a moment. "The one with the solitary figure looking out to sea. It hangs in our Chennai office." Prisha's breath caught. "Why, it reminds me that perspective changes everything. That same ocean, that once represented limitation to some, meant possibility to others." He smiled slightly, perhaps as a reminder that rejection sometimes redirects us to where we're meant to be. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the event coordinator requesting Rihan's presence for photographs with major donors. He excused himself with a promise to continue their conversation, but the evening's programming made that impossible. As the gala concluded, Prisha found herself on the hotel's oceanfront terrace. Watching moonlight create a silver path across the water, she remembered a younger version of herself, afraid to follow such illuminated paths into uncertainty. "Beautiful night," came Rihan's voice as he joined her at the railing. "Sagarpur always did have the most honest moonlight." "Honest moonlight?" she questioned. "It reveals and conceals in equal measure. Shows you just enough of the path ahead to take the next step, but never the full journey." He turned to face her directly. "I'm leaving tomorrow for our project in Kerala. I'd like to commission a series of paintings for our new educational center. Would you be interested?" The offer was professional, respectful of the lives they had built separately, yet it also represented something else, a bridge across the years. Recognition of how their individual journeys had brought them to a place where their paths could intersect again. Differently, but perhaps more meaningfully. "I'd be honored," Prisha replied, realizing she meant it completely, as they discussed the project. The ocean continued its eternal conversation with the shore advancing, retreating, finding new patterns in the sand with each passing wave. 6 months after the gala, Prisha stood in Aquabalance's newly completed educational center in Kerala, overseeing the installation of her commissioned series. The 5 large canvases told a visual story of coastal communities adapting to environmental change, traditional fishing methods evolving alongside conservation practices, the delicate interdependence of human livelihood and marine ecosystems. "They're extraordinary," said Divya, entering the exhibit space. "You've captured exactly what we wanted to convey to visitors." "Thank you," Prisha replied, genuinely pleased by the other woman's approval. Over the months of collaboration, she had come to respect Divya's sharp intelligence and practical vision. The engineer approached conservation with methodical precision, complementing Rihan's more intuitive understanding of fishing communities. Rihan's flight from Mumbai was delayed, but he should arrive by this evening's opening, Divya added, checking her phone. The minister confirmed attendance, along with representatives from 3 international conservation organizations. The exhibition space overlooked the Arabian Sea, its floor-to-ceiling windows creating the impression that the paintings floated above the water. Working on this commission had shifted something fundamental in Prisha's artistic approach. Gallery pieces had always observed coastal life from a careful distance, documenting change with technical skill but emotional remove. These new works participated in the story they told, inviting viewers to see themselves as part of a continuing narrative rather than distant observers. "I should check on the catering," Divya said, pausing at the doorway. "Oh, before I forget, Rihan mentioned you might be interested in extending the commission to our Chennai headquarters?" "We've discussed it," Prisha confirmed. "I'd need to balance it with my gallery commitments." Divya's expression softened slightly. "He values your perspective enormously. Said your work helps people see what matters most clearly." She hesitated before adding, "He told me about your history in Sagarpur, how you were important to each other once." Prisha felt suddenly vulnerable, unsure how to respond to this acknowledgement of a past she and Rehan had referenced only obliquely. During their professional collaboration, "I'm glad he found you," she said simply. "You've built something remarkable together." "Yes, we have," Divya agreed. Though, I've always understood there are different kinds of partnerships. Different kinds of love." With that enigmatic statement, she departed to oversee final preparations, left alone with her completed works. Prisha considered how the past 6 months had transformed her artistic practice. The commission had required extensive research trips, 2 fishing communities, hours of conversation with traditional fishermen and marine conservationists. Throughout the process, She and Rayhan had maintained a professional relationship that gradually evolved into a comfortable friendship, one that honored their shared history. Without being defined by it, their correspondence had been primarily about the project, yet occasionally veered into more personal territory. He sent photographs of significant conservation milestones. She shared sketches of works in progress. Neither mentioned the unspoken question that sometimes hung between them. What might have happened if different choices had been made 7 years ago? As evening approached, Prisha changed into a formal sari in shades of teal and gold colors, echoing the dominant palette of her paintings. The exhibition space filled with government officials, conservation advocates, and media representatives. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, explaining her artistic process and the environmental message behind each piece. When Rayhan finally arrived, their eyes met across the crowded room. He looked travel-worn but immediately brightened upon seeing the completed installation. As he made his way toward her, accepting congratulations from attendees, Prisha was struck by how naturally he inhabited this role, the visionary who had transformed his love for traditional fishing communities into a movement that preserved both environmental and cultural heritage. "You've created something magnificent," he said when he reached her, gesturing to the paintings. "They tell exactly the story we hope to share." "We make a good team," she replied. "Your vision, my interpretation." Something shifted in his expression, a recognition of the layers beneath her simple statement. Before he could respond, they were pulled into official photographs and introductions to important guests. Later, after formal speeches and the official ribbon cutting, Prisha escaped to the center's small, private beach. The exhibition had been received enthusiastically, with several conservation organizations requesting similar installations for their headquarters. Success should have felt entirely satisfying, yet she found herself seeking solitude beneath the vast expanse of stars. "May I join you?" Rayhan asked, approaching with careful steps across the sand. "Of course." She gestured to the space beside her. "Congratulations on the center. It's going to make a real difference, as will your art." A settled beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "You've developed a visual language that communicates complex environmental relationships in ways scientific data never could." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, listening to the rhythmic percussion of waves against shore.
Audivia.
"Mentioned she told you about our conversation," he finally said. "About Sigarpur?" "She did." Prisha traced patterns in the sand with her fingertips. "She seems remarkably understanding." "Divya sees things clearly. Always has." He smiled slightly. "She told me once that people can occupy different chambers of our hearts without diminishing the space for others." The implications of his statement hung in the night air between them. Prisha considered her next words carefully. "I've been thinking about honesty lately," she began. "About how rarely we're completely honest, even with ourselves. The truth is, I was afraid 7 years ago, not just of disappointing my family, but of stepping into uncertainty. You represented a path I couldn't predict or control, and now," he asked quietly, "now I understand that control is largely illusion. That growth requires risk." She met his gaze directly. "I'm sorry for hurting you. I needed that rejection," he said after a moment. "It forced me beyond the boundaries I'd accepted, led me to Divya, to aqua balance." His expression was contemplative, though I sometimes wondered ... What might have been, she finished. "I've wondered too." "And what conclusion did you reach?" Prisha considered the question seriously. "That we weren't ready for each other then. That we needed to become the people we are now separately before we could truly appreciate what the other offered." "What do we offer now?" His question was gentle, exploratory rather than demanding. "Friendship built on mutual respect, collaboration that makes both our work stronger." She smiled. "A shared history that informs but doesn't dictate our present." Rayhan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'd like that." He reached into his pocket and withdrew something that caught the moonlight, a piece of sea glass. "This one in amber hues. Found this during the site survey for the center. Thought you might add it to your collection." As she accepted the small token, her fingers brushed to contact without the electric uncertainty of youth, replaced by something more grounded. "More real. There you are," came Divya's voice, as she approached across the sand. The UNESCO representative wants to discuss expanding the educational program. She nodded warmly to Prisha. Sorry to interrupt. Not at all, Prisha replied, rising to her feet. I should check on the exhibition anyway. As they walked back toward the center, Prisha found herself studying the couple beside her, the easy synchronicity of their movements. The shorthand communication developed through years of partnership. What they had built together was beautiful in its certainty, its tested strength. Later that night, in her hotel room overlooking the sea, Prisha sketched a new concept, a triptych about different forms of love. The first panel showed new loves, passionate uncertainty. The second depicted love redirected into purpose and vision. The third illustrated something more complex, a mature love that encompassed friendship, mutual respect, and the acknowledgement of parallel paths. In the morning, she accepted Aquabalance's offer to create a companion series for their Chennai headquarters. Over the following year, this collaboration would lead to international recognition for her work on environmental storytelling through art. Her paintings would appear in conservation centers across South Asia, her perspective on coastal communities, valued precisely because it bridged understanding between traditional practices and necessary innovation. She and Rihan would maintain their friendship through professional collaboration and occasional personal correspondence. When Prisha eventually met someone who appreciated both her artistic vision and her independent spirit, a literature professor who looked at her paintings and saw the stories beneath the images, Rehan would send a thoughtful gift to celebrate her engagement, and sometimes, on quiet evenings, in her expanding studio in Sagarpur, Prisha would hold a piece of blue sea glass to the light, grateful for the lessons learned through both connection and separation. The glass had been transformed by its journey, tumbled by waves, smoothed by sand, ultimately becoming something more beautiful than its original form. Not unlike the human heart, she thought, which sometimes needed to be broken and reformed before it could fully reflect the light. On her desk sat an invitation to Aquabalance's 10th anniversary celebration, alongside a small collection of sea glass pieces, 7 from those early Sagarpur days, plus the amber piece from Kerala. Each represented a moment of connection across different seasons of her life. Each contained, in its transformed state, evidence that the most significant journeys rarely followed straight lines, and that true growth often came through tides of approach and retreat. Outside her window, the eternal conversation between ocean and shore continued, each wave writing temporary messages in the sand, each retreat creating space for new patterns to emerge. Prisha opened her sketchbook and began to draw, capturing not just what she saw, but what she had learned. That love took many forms. That timing determined destiny as much as choice, and that sometimes the most important connections were those that taught us who we might become, even when paths ultimately diverged. The tide was coming in, washing away footprints from earlier in the day. By morning, the beach would appear untouched, ready for new journeys to begin.